Welcome to today's lesson on solving word problems using percent proportions or percent equations. We're teaching this lesson based off the understanding that you just learned how to solve percent proportions and percent equations, and we're going to move on to solving word problems. Just for about 30 seconds or a minute, I want to provide a quick refresher on kind of the basic formula that we use to solve percent proportions. You see the is over of equals percent over 100. Or as I like to say, the more practical way, that the part over the whole equals the part over the whole. And I say that because a percent is a part out of 100. So for instance, in a really basic example, and I'll use something that really you already know the answer to, we would say that 6 out of 12 is what part of 100. So you kind of have the part over the whole and the part over the whole. We're looking for the percent here. If you saw the proportion, you simply cross multiply. So 12 times x is going to give you 12x. You'll have 6 times 100 is 600. You divide by 12 on both sides, and you'll be left with x equals 50%. So again, 6 out of 12 is 50% out of 100. Now, let's go ahead and move on to word problems. So our first word problem says this. 9 middle school students are celebrating their birthday today. If this represents 2.5% of the entire middle school student population, how many middle school students are there? Well, anytime you start a word problem, you immediately have to ask yourself, what are we looking for? If you go back to the first slide, are we looking for the part? Or are we looking for the whole? Are we looking for a percent? Or are we looking for something out of 100? Well, if you read this question closely, it says 9 middle school students are celebrating their birthday. If this represents 2.5% of the entire middle school, how many middle school students are there? Well, how many middle school students refers to the entire middle school. So we automatically know that we're looking for the whole amount, and that's going to be our variable x. We know that 2.5% must go in the numerator out of 100, and so that logically leaves us to believe that it's going to be 9 students out of a total amount equals 2.5 over 100. Now that we've set up our percent proportion, we simply need to solve it by solving our proportion. X times 2.5 is 2.5x. You got 9 times 100, which is 900. We'll divide each side by 2.5. Pull out our calculator. Right here, 900 divided by 2.5 equals 360 students. Now, when you solve word problems, it's very important to do a common sense check. And what that means is simply ask yourself, does my answer make sense? Does 9 out of 360 seem like it could be 2.5 out of 100? Since 9 is pretty small, 2.5 is pretty small, we know that the number of students has to be rather large. I think we've done a great job. If we go on to the next problem, problem 2, Wesleyan's middle school soccer team played 25 games and won 17 of them. What percent of the games did the team lose? Again, ask yourself, are we trying to find the part? Are we trying to find the whole? Or are we trying to find the percent? Very easily, it tells you right here what you're doing. It says, what percent of the games did the team lose? So again, we set up our proportion right here. Percent would be x, always out of 100. And so we want to find what percent did they lose. And you got to kind of read between the lines here. This says that they won 17 games. So you have a couple of options. We know that 17 is part of the whole season, so we put 17 over 25. We could do that, or we could subtract and say, well, 25 games they played minus 17 games they won means that they lost 8 games. So what you could do is you could actually plug in 8 instead of 17, and that'll save you some work at the end of the problem. So we'll go ahead and say it's saying what percent did they lose. So 8 divided by 25 equals x over 100. We'll solve our proportion. 25x equals 800. I'm going to divide by 25 on both sides. How many times does 25 go into 800? The answer will be 32%. Again, does my answer make sense? 8 out of 25. Does that seem like it could be 32% over 100? Yes, I think that makes logical sense. 8 is a good bit less than half. Half would be 12.5. 32% is a good bit less than half. Just so you could see what would have happened if we had started with 17, because it said that's how many they won. We'd have 17, the part over the whole amount, equals x over 100. And we do our solving our proportion, doing our cross multiplication. And what you'll realize is when you divide 1700 by 25 on both sides, you'll wind up with 68%. Again, 68% is the number of games that they won, but it's asking how much they lose. So you would say 100% minus 68% equals 32%, which is our answer. The last thing I want to mention is we talked about using a percent equation as well. Instead of using a proportion for this problem, you could have said that 8 equals 25x. And then what would you have done, again, because you learned this before, so I'm going to go over this very quickly. Divide by 25 on both sides. 8 divided by 25 would give you 0.32 equals x. You simply slide the decimal place over twice to get your 32%.